In this video, I'm going to go over the basics of rigging in Blender and hopefully teach you how to build an armature and have that deform your mesh in the way that you want, so you can pose it in different funny ways. So to start with, I'm going to make a simple character that you should be able to recreate. I'm just going to use the default cube and I'm going to duplicate it with Shift D. And then I'm going to add a mirror modifier to that so that our character can have some little legs. Maybe like this. Something like this. Just gonna move him up here. And then I want him to have 2 eyes so that he's cuter. Like this. I'm gonna give him some color as well. Make him red. And I'll make his eyes black. Not that it matters too much, just for fun, but now we have a little character. And I want to give him feet as well. Hold on. Go into edit mode. I'm not going to go too much over the modeling here. This is about the rigging. So here's some feet, very big feet, but he's allowed to have big feet. And now he's all ready. And all he needs is a skeleton. So I'll go into object mode and press Shift A to add an armature. And here it is. That's the armature so far, just a single bone. And I'm gonna move that up into his head, which is kind of all he is. And now you can't see the bone anymore, which is not ideal. So what you can do is you can go into object data properties and go into viewport display, and there you can check this box that says in front. And now the bone or the armature will always be rendered on top of everything, so you can always see it, which is very useful, especially when building the armature, but in general it's useful when you're trying to pose your character, because the armature is inside of the mesh usually. And yeah, so that's a good thing to check. I'm also going to check names just to make it easier while I'm building, and I'm going to check axes as well. So now I have all the info that I might need. And now we can get to building the armature actually. So to do that, you select the armature and you go into edit mode. And now I'm going to select the tail of the bone, which is the skinny side, and the fat side is called the head. I'm going to extend with G. I'm going to move the tail up to the top of the head. And then with E, I can extrude other bones. Hold on, I'm gonna look head on here. I might just do the leg bone and not even bother with a hip bone, because I'm not going to need them. And then I can demonstrate that bones in an armature don't necessarily have to be physically connected. I can now parent this leg bone to my head bone. If I select the leg bone and then shift select the head bone, and then with Control P I can parent. And if I choose connected here, it's going to jump up so that the head of the child, I guess, connects with the tail of the parent, which is not what I want in this case, as you can see. So instead, I'm going to choose Control P again, and I'm going to choose Keep Offset. So now you'll see that they are connected, but it didn't move the bone. So this is what we want, and you can see in pose mode, if I rotate this, now this leg bone follows. But if I rotate this, it gets to do whatever it pleases without affecting anything. And the same if you move it. So I'm going to go back to edit mode, and I'm going to start naming my bones. So this bone is the head bone, and you can do this easily by pressing F2. Then you can, if you select the bone and press F2, you can quickly rename bones. I'm going to call this a thigh bone, and because it's on my character's left side, I'm going to name it thigh.L. And this can be capitalized or not, it's however you please, but it has to end with .L. Because when I'm done building this side of the armature, I'm going to have Blender automatically fill in the right side. And it can do that if I name my bones correctly, like this, with a .l. So now I'll continue my armature building here. I just want 2 leg bones, so that I want it to bend like this. That's where the knee is. And then I want to add a foot bone, maybe like this. And then I guess a toe bone, since this is kind of a long foot. And then I can adjust as I want. So I want this to be a bit further down maybe, and I want, let's see, the knee is probably in a good place. Yeah, so this looks pretty good, and I can go into pose mode. By the way, if you are in object mode and you select the armature, you can quickly enter pose mode by pressing Control and Shift, and then it does that without you having to go up here and select it. So now let's see if that works the way I want it to. If I'm moving here on its x-axis, this looks good. This is what I was going for, and everything looks great. This is not the easiest way to pose an armature. It's kind of finicky to have to go and move each individual bone to make like a natural shape. So there's an easier, better way. And by the way, now that I messed up my armature here, I can press A to select everything in pose mode, and then Alt-G resets the position of the bones, which I guess I hadn't changed too much, and then Alt-R resets the rotation. And if I had changed the scale, then Alt-S resets that as well. So that's nice to know. The position it's reset to always is the position the armature is in edit mode. So that's how that works. I'll rename these bones as well. This is calf.l, foot.l, and toe.l. Now to make it easier to pose, oops, I've accidentally put an extra bone in here. Get rid of that. What I want to do is to add an extra bone coming out here of the heel and just directly out behind here. And this is going to be the I key controller bone. I'm not sure what the proper terminology is. I've heard people call it the IK target bone, but the point is I'm going to call it IK leg.L. You don't need to call it IK dots, whatever. This is to your own preference as far as I know. I don't know what the proper naming conventions are there, but the important part is that you end with .L. That's all you need to worry about too much. But it's good to have it called IK something, because you're gonna need to be able to recognize this bone. So now I'm gonna go back into pose mode and select the calf bone. And then in here, in bone constraint properties, you can add a IK constraint, inverse kinematics. So I'll do that. My target will be my armature, which I can either select in here or I can use the eyedropper tool. And the bone that I'm targeting is the ik.leg. So now that's selected, and now this turned yellow because it's doing something. It has a constraint applied to it. And now you can see if I move this, oops. Oh, I forgot one crucial thing. Now you can't see anything because this is still parented to the rest of the armature, which it shouldn't be. So now select this in edit mode, select this IK bone, and press Alt-P to clear the parent. Now it's its own thing and not parented to the armature anymore, and now it should work. So now if I move this, it controls the whole armature, which is not what we want. We want it to control the leg. And the reason that it's controlling the whole armature right now is because this chain length is set to 0. So in order for it to not control the whole armature but only some bones, you need to set a number here. So for example, if I set 1, it will only control the calf bone. And if I set the chain length to 2, it will control the whole leg, which is what I want, because I only have 2 bones in my leg currently. If I had more, I could set the chain to a higher number, or if I weren't making a leg, for example. But I'm just going to set it to 2 now, because that's the full leg. Now I set the constraint by by going in here, but there's a shortcut. If you're in pose mode, select the IK controller and then you select the calf bone. You can press Shift I to add an IK constraint, but now it already has it, so it won't work. But that gets you to this point where you have what we have right now, except for the chain length. So that's just a quick way to do that. But as you can see, as much as it does now only move the leg, which is what we want, it's very floppy and it doesn't have any direction. The knee is just pointing wherever it wants, and we want the knee to point in a realistic direction. So I'm gonna go back into edit mode. I'm gonna extrude a bone from the knee, and again I'm going to clear its parent, and now I'm going to move this bone over here. So I want the knee to point at this bone when it bends, so that it doesn't bend in all sorts of directions. And this is called the pole target bone. So I'm going to call this pole.leg.l. And then if I go back here and I go back to pose mode, I can choose a pole target, which first of all is going to be the armature, and then the bone in the armature is the pole.leg. And now you can see that it screwed up the direction of our leg bones here. So it's trying to aim at the pole target, and in trying to do that, it has made it so that the x-axis of these bones points toward the pole target. But because the x-axis wasn't originally pointing towards the pole target, it's a little bit weird. But because it wasn't, this is how we had it. The x-axis was pointing this way, so Blender has automatically flipped it, and now the leg is wrong. So what a lot of people will do is just change this number to the -90, I guess, here, but that's not the only way to fix it, and it might not even be the right way to fix it. So there's the better way potentially is to go into edit mode and then select all the bones whose axis you want to adjust. And then if you press N, it'll open this tab, and you can see that it says roll here. And if I change the number here, it only affects the toe right now because that was the latest bone that I selected. But if I want it to affect all the bones that I've selected, I hold Alt and then I change the number. And now I can adjust this roll here to be -90. So now the x-axis is facing the pole target. If I go back into pose mode, it's facing the right direction, and now I'm having a different issue, which is that the leg isn't bending anymore. And the issue here is that I need to go into edit mode and push this knee forward ever so slightly so that it kind of already is bending in the direction that we want it to bend. And with that all set, it works. There's a lot to this, but now it works. And there's one thing I want to add before I'll say that this leg is done, which is that as of right now, we don't have much control over the foot. It will just point downwards if we lift up the leg like this, because it's just inheriting the rotation of the calf bone, which looks all right and right now, I guess, but we don't have any control. So if we want the foot to point up while the calf bone is pointing down, we can't. We can't do that. So to make us able to do that, I'm going to parent the foot bone to the IK leg bone, and I'm going to keep the offset. And now if I go into pose mode, I'm able to adjust the foot rotation with that, which is what I want. But this has given us one other issue, which is that if I now detach the IK leg bone, which I can do, it will also take the foot with it, which I don't want. So to fix that, I can add another IK constraint to the foot bone, and I'll choose copy location, and then I can copy the location from the target will be armature, and then from the calf bone. So now it will be attached to the calf bone, and it automatically attaches it to the head of the calf bone, which we don't want, so we're going to set it down to the tail of the calf bone. And now, with all of that done, this works. So now the foot stays put until we decide that we want to do something with it, and everything is working, everything's great. Now this armature is looking good. It's just one side done, but again, we'll fix that soon. But before I do that, I want to add a root bone. And I can do that by going into edit mode and just pressing Shift A, and it will add the bone. And I'm gonna change the name to root. And what this will allow us to do is, in pose mode right now, if I want to move the whole armature, like the whole character in the future at the same time, I'm gonna have to select everything, every single bone, and move them, and it's kind of cumbersome. So with a root bone, I can parent all the crucial bones, which would be the head bone currently, and the target bones. I'm gonna parent those with the offset to the root bone. Now, if I go to pose mode, I can just move the root bone and rotate and everything, and the whole armature follows. When I was rotating this foot bone, I noticed that the leg doesn't follow, which isn't very realistic if we're thinking human logic. So one thing we can do, it might cause some problems, I'm not sure. But what we can do is we can go into edit mode, and then we can parent this pole target to the IK leg target with the offset as always. And then when we go into pose mode, if we start posing the leg, the pole target now moves, which also gives us some more flexibility here, but it also does some weird things like this. So it's whatever. I don't know if this is always useful, but it's useful sometimes. And now if we rotate the foot, the whole leg comes with it, which makes sense. And again, makes for some more natural poses. So that's something you can do. With all that done, I think it's time to get his other leg working as well. So if I now press A again in edit mode to select the whole armature, I can right click and choose symmetrize. And it will now mirror this whole setup with all the constraints and all of the parented bones and everything, and rename them to .r instead of .l. So now we have the whole armature. I can't think of a single thing I'm missing, and it's just great. But it's only the armature still. The mesh is not being affected, and we can easily solve that by going into object mode and selecting our mesh, selecting all the parts of our mesh, and then selecting the armature last, and parenting the mesh to our armature with Control P, and then I'm gonna choose with automatic weights. And what this has done, if I go into object mode and I select a part of my mesh, I can go here to object data properties, and I can see I now have a bunch of vertex groups. These are the vertices affected by each bone. So each bone has its own vertex group now. And what I mean with affected is if I select the armature and I go into pose mode, you'll see that things are moving, but they're not moving exactly how I want them to. And there are ways to work with this. So our first issue is that the leg isn't bending. It's just kind of stretching in a weird way. And our second issue is that the head is getting all messed up, which is not what I was going for. So I can set all this back, and I want to go back into object mode, and I'm going to select the legs first. I feel like that's our first issue. This mesh is way too simple. There's nothing for the bones to work with. I only have like 8 vertices here, and they're so far away from the knee, and it's not ideal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a loop cut with Control R, I'm gonna add another loop cut. I'm gonna add a bunch of loop cuts with Control R and the scroll wheel. So now we have a knee, and I'm gonna do this around every joint of the skeleton, of the armature. Same down here, around the foot area. I'm gonna add one loop cut here on the toe. And now, if I go back to object mode and I parent these legs with automatic weights again, it should work a little bit better. And it does. So now it actually bends and does all the great things that we wanted. The foot bends as well. I'm gonna change the bone display to stick here so we can see what's going on. So yeah, this looks a lot better, a lot more manageable, but the head is still being crazy and it's not what we want. So that brings us back to the vertex groups that I was talking about earlier. If I select this part of the mesh, the head, and I go into weight paint mode, then I can select each bone here and I can see what they affect, what part of the mesh do they affect. And really, I don't want the thigh bones to affect the head at all. The only thing I want to have affect the head is the head bone. So what I can do is I can go into edit mode, and then I can apply a weight of 1 to the head bone, to this vertex group. And doing that, I go back into weight paint mode. Now the head is red, which means that it has a weight of 1 all over the whole head. I'm gonna change here so that the colors of my character aren't distracting. So this is the weight. It has a weight of 1. And now it should look a lot better. We can go into pose mode and see if it actually does look better. Oops. And it looks better, but it doesn't. It's not exactly what we want still. And I don't even know if it looks that much better. And the issue here is that the thigh bones are still affecting the head. What you saw me do earlier when I was assigning a weight to all of the vertices in the head is the same thing that you're doing when you're weight painting. So if you enter weight paint mode, and you click up here in active tool and workspace settings, you can see your brushes, and then I can now change the weight. I'm going to change it to no weight just to demonstrate. So I can now paint on these vertices and I can change how much influence the bones have. So now the head bone doesn't have much influence on the head part of the mesh, which again is not actually what we want, but I just wanted to demonstrate. If I go back into weight paint mode, I can now change my brush to have a weight of 1, and I can color this whole thing in again. And if I just want to color in a large piece of a mesh or a whole mesh, the gradient tool is useful for that, because it allows you to just kind of drag and it'll cover the whole thing. But our main issue here wasn't that the head bone doesn't affect the head mesh, because it does. The issue is that even though it has, the head bone is supposed to have full control over the head, the thigh bones have control as well. One thing I'm gonna do real quick is I'm gonna go into edit and I'm gonna untick this lock object modes, which will allow us by control clicking on the armature to switch interaction mode. So now I can make it so that the armature is in pose mode and this part of the mesh is in weight paint mode. So now I can control click on any bone and I'll see what it influences on this mesh. And I'm seeing here that this thigh bone has some influence even though the head bone has full control. And to avoid this, I can go into options and choose auto normalize. Now whenever I add weight to a part of the mesh, it will take that weight away from some other bone. So to kind of try it out, I can try to change this to have 0 weight, and then I'm gonna give it full control over it again. And if I go to the thigh bones here, you can see it has now taken the influence away from the thigh bones, which is what we wanted. Now I know that the eyes are probably also not painted the way that we want them to be. See, the thighs here are affecting it, and the head bone isn't affecting the eyes completely, which is what we want. So I'm gonna give them full influence here, and that should have automatically taken care of the thigh bones, and it has. So now that was a lot, I feel like, but hopefully you understood what was going on. So now I'm gonna check this again, because I'm done weight painting. I can go into object mode, and then I can go into pose mode. Oops. I can go into pose mode. And now the head isn't being deformed in some weird way that I don't want. It's only doing exactly what I want. And that's just beautiful. And everything is deforming the way that I would want it to. So we have a pretty good rig here, I think. This would let us make some funny, good animations and poses. And I just want to show one last thing that you can do with your rig. So currently I set the bone display to be stick, and there are some other ones you can choose in here. One issue with stick is it can be kind of hard to grab at times. So something you can do is that if you go into bone properties, you can choose under viewport display to add custom bone shapes. So first you need a shape, which if I go into object mode, I can just add a cube in here, move that over here somewhere. And I should have been naming these things, but yeah. I'm gonna name that control so that I can find it. Then I'm gonna select this in pose mode. I'm gonna select these two bones, and now I can choose an object. If you hold Alt while choosing, it will apply it to both the selected bones. Otherwise it only applies it to one. So I'm gonna select the control bone here, or the control shape, and I can choose wireframe here. Oops, and I have to hold Alt while I do it, again, to apply it to both of them. And I want these to be much smaller, so like this, maybe. I didn't hold Alt when I did part of this, but here it is. And another thing I can do, if I select both of these, I can give it a bit of an offset here, so it's kind of on the back of the feet. And now these are pretty easy to grab and easy to spot. And it's just an example. You can do this all around the whole rig to make things make more sense. And if you have more of a complex rig, this can be really useful. So now you can get to posing your little character in all sorts of funny ways. Oops. This actually brings me to one last thing that I want to show, which is that now our IK bones and our target bones are able to deform the mesh, which we don't want. So I can fix that by just going in here and checking the IK leg, see? And you can see that it's affecting this bone, even though it really shouldn't be. I can fix that now with weight painting, but I could avoid this issue altogether if I had gone to all of the controller bones here and unchecked deform. Oh, that actually fixes it. That fixes it even after the fact. So now those bones are not allowed to deform anything. And everything's great. And I'm just gonna make the simplest animation to finish off here. I'm gonna go to frame 0, insert a keyframe with location and rotation, and then I'm gonna copy this whole pose, go to frame 10, and then I'm gonna Control-Shift-V to mirror and paste the same pose. And then I can insert a keyframe with that, and I'm just gonna Control-C and Control-V this keyframe. end the animation at 20, and now we have a beautiful little animation of a man walking. And that's it. Now you should be ready to make a bunch of funny armatures and a bunch of funny rigs. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned one thing. Goodbye.